iTestify is about testifying of what Jesus Christ has done and can do in each of our lives. Through testimony of people just like you, and through study of His Word, our prayer is to encourage each follower of Christ to be a light in this world. So let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father, which is in heaven. Matthew 5:16.
Welcome to iTestify. Hopefully you have all been enjoying the past episodes and sharing it with family and friends. Today we have a special treat to have Tony Dennis here, who works with the Pacific Union in the School of Evangelism, specifically Souls West.
Yes.
And so he's going to share not only his work there, but also his story and how the Lord has led him there. So please, Dennis, start with us with your story.
Yeah, my story starts out very regular. Came from a regular home, middle-class home. A kid who loved to play video games and watch cartoons and do everything like normal kids did. The only thing that would be different maybe from what we're used to is that I never ever went to church. Never ever had a Bible in my home. I never read it. The only stories I knew from the Bible were maybe what Disney Channel might show, Prince of Egypt and stuff like that. So I never had a chance to really open this thing up and know anything about it. Never went to a church service till I was 21 years old. And so I went through life that way. Played a lot of video games and didn't really enjoy school too much. Once you play a bunch of video games, you just want something more exciting and stuff like that. And my life took a little change when I was 13. Me and my dad, we loved to watch sports together, watch ESPN together and stuff like that. And one time I came into his room and he was watching a different kind of sport that I had never seen before. He was watching something called the World Series of Poker. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that before. But a poker tournament, and it was down to like the last two people of the whole tournament. And when that happens, the prize money, the first place prize money is all dumped on the table in cash. And so I think the first place prize back then was $3 million. And so there's $3 million dumped between these two guys. And so I got really interested. So what is this sport? What's going on here? You know, I don't got to be like 6'8" and LeBron James to play this sport. How do I get involved in this? And so as they play this tournament, the commercials come on, they advertise free poker websites and things that you can play on and stuff. You don't have to be 21 to gamble or anything. You can just play it for free. And so I started to do this as a teenager, learned how to play poker, different forms of poker, and eventually I wanted to do this for a living, be a professional gambler, and play this game for a living. And that's pretty much the course of where I was heading.
And you were 13?
I was 13 when I first saw this.
Wow.
And from there, I just wanted to do that for the rest of my life.
You single-mindedly wanted to be a professional poker player.
Yes.
From that point on.
Mm-hmm. And so I pursued this. I played for sort of what you call play money when I was a teenager. But when I was 18, you actually could put money on the site and begin to play for real. And so I had a job at Walmart that I was working, and I would put a little bit of money on there. And when I was 19, I ended up winning a couple of tournaments. So over the course of 2 days, I made about $9,000.
Wow.
Back then, it was a lot of money to me to win in 2 days. And so immediately I quit my job and I said, I'm ready to be, a professional poker player. I'm going to go do this for a living. And that's what I attempted to do. For about 6 months, I did that, didn't have a job, and lived off of the money that I won. But as a prideful young kid who never really learned how to handle money, that money went away very fast, squandered on more video games and expensive clothing and stuff like that. And so my mom saw this happening. I had moved out, but she still, saw this happening to me. And so she actually told me about a job that I could get where she works. And she works at the Franchise Tax Board there. I mention that just because it's the most boring job that I've ever had. But it was a seasonal job. She got me in there, and so I would work from January to May. And then for the next 6 months, I would play poker for a living and still try to do that, still pursue my dream of being that professional poker player. But I never won money like that again. I just made enough to stay and pay rent and stuff like that to pay bills, but I never won thousands of dollars very quickly any longer. And so I went back to that seasonal job again. And in the second year that I went back to that job, I ended up meeting a girl who grew up in the Seventh-day Adventist church, a Christian girl. And she would talk about strange things that I'd never heard before about worship and about God and in a way. And she was very excited about him and about these things. And over the course of this 6 months, we sat very close together and we got to know each other and things like that. And she actually ended up in a relationship with me after that 6 months. Not something I recommend or anything like that, but we ended up in a relationship then. And at that point, unfortunately, I was turning 21. And now I could play poker in casinos for real. It wasn't just some online thing. I could do the real thing that I'd studied how to do for years and years and years. And so for about 6 months after that, I could play in casinos. I was a lot better at playing poker, so I won some money, and we could go out and do fun things. So we could go out and eat whatever we want, go to movies, do all the fun things that I used to do back then. But after that 6 months was over, I ended up losing money. I never saved anything. We just spent it as soon as I would win it. And so once the fun was over and I had to sort of slow down, I couldn't gamble away rent money and stuff like that. I had to, sort of almost go back to getting a real job. Then she started to go back to church. She had gotten away from it when she got in a relationship with me. And so she started to go back. She remembered how good Jesus was and that there's nothing funner than a relationship with him. And so she started to go back. And that's when my life started to change there, when I saw her going back to church then.
Did you go back? Or did you go to church with her?
Not at first. I was an atheist. I was very indifferent towards God, but I wasn't one who just hated God or didn't want anything to do with him. I just never knew him growing up. And so it was something that was unfamiliar to me, but I was okay if she was happy. She can go and do that. But she would come back very excited. And so eventually I said, "What are you so excited about?" And she would talk about things in the Bible. And so when I was a kid, I loved to read books. I read a lot of science fiction books, loved those type of things. And so I could pick up any book and read it. So I just picked up the Bible and started to just read it like a book, from Genesis chapter 1. And I started reading through, and it was interesting stories and stuff like that, and got through Genesis, and said, "Oh, it's sort of cool." Then I got to Exodus, and as I said, I've seen Prince of Egypt and stuff like that before, so everybody knows the story of Moses and the Ten Commandments, and that was interesting. But then I get to the second half of Exodus, and if you know, once you get to chapter 25, it starts to talk about something called the tabernacle, the sanctuary, and it starts to describe the building of the sanctuary, and then it started to get very boring to me. Unfortunately, when I got to this point, because I just didn't know what it was talking about. And then you get to a book called Leviticus. It's everybody's favorite book, huh?
Yeah. Better than Numbers.
I read through Leviticus and I was like, man, this is very strange. I use that nice word. This is very strange to me. And I labored through it because she was my girlfriend, probably. Labored through the book of Leviticus. And I was like, man, I don't want to read anymore. I got to Numbers and I skimmed the first part of Numbers and it looked the same. And so I was just like, I don't know what you're so excited about, but have fun with that. And that was my first experience with the Bible, really.
And then?
Then she came the next week after that with a book. It's a little book. It's called Happiness for Life, it says on it. And it's really the book entitled Steps to Christ. It says Happiness for Life on it. It's used as a witnessing tool, used by colporteurs, canvassers, as they go door to door. The church that she went to had some of these. And so she brought it to me, and I began to read this book. It's very small, The Steps to Christ, if you've ever seen it. And so I said, I could read this in like a day. I love to read that much. And as I began to read, I came to a point in the first chapter where it talks about how Satan pictured God as a severe judge, as one who was waiting to punish people for their sins. And I actually had that sort of a picture, back when I would interact with friends. I had a lot of friends who actually were Christians, but unfortunately they didn't really encourage me in a Christian path. They're interested in the same things as I was. And so I never really saw any power in Christianity there. And, there was something that they would tell me I was a fool for, and Psalms 14:1 is a verse that I always sort of go to, remind myself where I came from. Psalms 14 verse 1. They would laugh at me for this, but they wouldn't show me anything more about God. But Psalms 14:1, it says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. And so when I would say I don't believe in God, or I would make bad jokes about God and things like that back in my previous life, they would say things like, oh man, you're going to get struck by lightning. You're going to get hit by a bus when you go outside. They pictured it like that. And so when I read that in Steps to Christ, that it said Satan pictures God as that severe judge waiting to punish people for their sins, it was like, I was reminded of those things from my childhood. But then the next sentence speaks about the fact that Jesus came to reveal the infinite love of God because there was a misunderstanding. And I just had never heard that about Jesus in my life before. I'd heard Jesus' name and stuff that he did, or dying on a cross was very vague to me and stuff like that, but I'd never heard that he came to reveal the true character of God to people, to man. And so that just intrigued me in the first chapter, and it just made me read the book, and she uses so many scriptures in that book about Jesus. And so when I got through the book, I said, I didn't see any of this in Exodus and Leviticus. Like, where is she? Is this really true about Jesus? Is this really in the Bible? And so I picked up the Bible again, but I went to the New Testament this time and started to read the Gospel of Matthew. And when I got to the Sermon on the Mount, that's when my life truly changed. There I saw a code of ethics, I guess you can say, or a way of life. And I thought, man, if everybody lived like this man is describing, the world would be perfect. Maybe this is heaven. There, I read that, and, as I was trying to play poker and win a bunch of money so that I could stay away from the world. What I'd seen on the news, what I'd seen from family experiences, from other things in life, I just didn't want this. I knew this world was bad in my mind, and I wanted an escape from it or security from it. And I thought I could find that in money or doing something that I love to do. And so when I read the Sermon on the Mount, that just changed my whole perspective. And I said, this man has something that's above what I've read before up until that time.
How did your life change once you got that new perspective, or did you still continue to go down a different path?
Once I read the end of the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus sort of closes and he says, hey, whoever hears my words and does them, I'll liken him unto a wise man. But whoever hears my words and does them not, I'll liken him unto a fool. And so I didn't want to be a fool anymore. And I didn't think that any man could come up with such a perfect, simple thing like the Sermon on the Mount. I thought that he got this from God. And so I said, man, I need to learn more about this. If there really is a God, this is like a life-changing thing when I'm 21 years old, never believing in God before. And so my girlfriend, she actually gave me Christ Object Lessons, that book next. And so now I was going to work again, seasonal job again, working with my mom and her. And I would just go to work, and I would come home, and all I would do is read the Bible, read through the rest of the Gospels, and read through that book, Christ Object Lessons, to try and understand a little bit more. And eventually, soon after that, I said, I need to go to church. I need to see what this is about. Jesus talks about his church so much, and so I started going to church with her after that, and then life changed very quickly from there. I would be in my room reading my Bible, and my dad would come in to my room, and he would say, see a Bible in my hand, and like, hey man, are you okay? Are you okay? What's going on? I'd never been reading the Bible before. He would come in my room and find me playing like a video game or doing something, watching a movie, but I was just reading the Bible, and he thought something was wrong with me.
Wow.
It was so different.
That's cool.
So you started going to church. Did you find a community there?
Yes. The first time I went to church, it was funny. It was I guess it was a very strong sermon, according to the church members. They came up to me afterwards like, oh, that wasn't a sermon for a baby Christian. They said these things. They were like word from me, and I was just like, oh, wow, that was good, what I heard. And the best thing about the service was that the preacher's wife came to me. She saw that I was a visitor. I stood up. They asked who's a visitor in there, and she came to me afterwards, and she had a book. She had a Doug Batchelor book, to give to me. And that was one of the best gifts you can give me. I love books. I love to read. And just that they did that, was a really cool thing to me, that they cared enough. She didn't even know me to come and give me a gift the first time she saw me there. So it was great what I found in the Adventist church.
So eventually you decided that everything that you heard was true and you wanted to commit your life to God, or did you have anything that kind of tripped you up and you were hung up about, or?
When I read John chapter 3 and the interview with Nicodemus and Jesus saying, you must be born of the water and of the Spirit, or you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven, I knew I needed to be baptized. And so I told my girlfriend that at work, I need to be baptized, and she said, you're going to need to go through some studying and make sure you know what you're doing. And I said, this got to happen quick. He said, I got to be baptized, So I was just like, can't enter the kingdom of heaven. But it was very good. She would bring these Bible studies that she would get from a woman from the church, a little Historical of Prophecy Bible study guides that you had to fill in the blanks for all the questions. And the first one was about prophecy, Daniel chapter 2. And so I was just used to reading the Gospels, but when I saw prophecy in the Bible, and I loved history and stuff, that just blew my mind even more. And so that's all I would do. Go to work, come, and I would get those Bible studies, bring it back, and no Bible worker with me or anything. It was just me learning how to figure out how to get through the Bible, where the books were at, just all by myself. Just spent hours on these Bible studies, filling them out and going through each one. And in less than 5 months, I was baptized.
Wow.
Amazing. Wow. What's really interesting is that the same energy and intensity that you had for poker or for video games was now being converted and transformed into a different avenue.
Yes.
And so now you'd come home and just like on your own, study the Word, learn how to search the Bible, learn how to study the Bible. That is really powerful, how God can still use your talents and your personality, but then convert it and transform it for His kingdom.
It's as if He's just protecting you all along that path until you finally choose Him.
Yes.
Still building you, even though you haven't chosen yet.
Yeah, exactly.
So in essence, you just left poker behind. Is that right? Did you ever go back to it?
I played in a casino one more time after I started to believe in God, because to me it was not gambling. It was a game, like basketball or something like that. I never played blackjack. I never did slot machines or anything like that. I would just play poker. But eventually reading the Bible and what I was going through, it finally convinced me that I couldn't play poker for a living anymore. Right. And so I left it off before I got baptized.
And then how did you get to Souls West? And did you go through Souls West as a student?
Yes, I did. After, putting away poker, I didn't know really what I was going to do with my life, because I had dropped out of school to play poker. Now I was about to turn 22. And I'd been out of school for 3.5 years and didn't have any intention of going back. But now I didn't have any career to really try and focus on. And so I started to try and become like a permanent worker there at the Franchise Tax Board. And so for about 6 months, I didn't have a job. I wasn't doing poker anymore once that season ended. And in that 6 months, since I didn't have anything to do and I was trying to become permanent and I was just sort of living on what do you call that when you're not working? They give you
unemployment.
Unemployment, yeah, the unemployment benefits. All I did was study the Bible, watch videos about the Bible, watch a bunch of preachers, and I'd read a bunch of the books from the church, the books like Desire of Ages and The Great Controversy. And eventually, God convicted me to go back to school, and so I ended up going to university in the year 2013. And there were people who came who were canvassers, co-porters, people from Souls West came recruiting for Youth Rush, a summer Youth Rush program to come and learn how to canvass and earn money for school. And you would be selling the same books that I loved now that I was reading. I'd read all of them by then. And so I was not excited to go door to door and have to talk to people, because I was actually very introverted. I love reading books, but I didn't want to have to talk to people about the books. But I knew that I needed to come out of my shell and stuff like that, and it was going to do that for me. They explained that. And so I went canvassing, and during that summer, I actually got hurt canvassing. I was canvassing in San Francisco, and I was going up and down the steps of all these Victorian homes, and I was coming down, and I just sprained my ankle severely. I love to play basketball all my life, and I'd sprained ankles before, but I never was that bad of a sprain. My ankle was just huge, and I couldn't go out and canvas anymore. And so everybody would leave. I would just be back at the church that we were staying at, and everybody would leave, and I would just be there by myself and just trying to read more of the Bible and become a better canvasser and learn how to do this. And I started to really ask God, how can I be better for you? How can I reach people in a better way? Because I was having a very good experience. God was showing me that, reaching these people at the doors was very, very important. And I needed to be better at it. I wasn't used to it. And so when I was asking him, how do I become better? All I was getting was Souls West. Souls West, like an audible voice telling me. And all I knew about Souls West back then was that it was an unaccredited school and it was 2 years long, and I was already at a university on a path that I had set and these type of things. So I was like, oh, I'm not going to some unaccredited place. What am I going to do afterwards? I don't know what is it even about. What am I going to be able to do?
Yeah.
Those questions
Doesn't seem logical.
come up. Yeah, it wasn't logical at all to me. And so I'd always said no, but now I'm getting this Souls West thing at this time when I'm just hurt and cannot even, get away from it. And they went by like that for a day, and I just tried to brush it off. And then the second day I'm back there just with my ankle propped up, trying to study, and then it just comes at me again, just Souls West, this feeling that I need to go to this school. And it went into the evening, and I was just praying. Everybody went to sleep. They got back, went to sleep at this time. I'm up to like 1 a.m. just praying with God. Why am I getting this feeling? I've never had this before, like a calling. And eventually I just had to say, God, maybe too much blood has rushed to my ankle, my head. But if it's really you, just give me some type of a sign that I'll just know that it's you telling me this, that I'm not, going crazy. And he just put the director of the school, Mike Tuzon, upon my mind. And that's all that I had. I'd met him one time before. He'd come and visited a program before, and so I didn't know what was going to happen. But I said, okay, and that's what I went to sleep with, Mike Tuzon. And the next morning was the last day of the blitz that we were on, the last day we were going to be in the location that we were in. And I'm just waiting on breakfast, and then Mike Tuzon walks into the program that wasn't there before. I didn't know where he had come from or anything, but I was just sort of frozen. I was just like, oh, hey, what's up? And he went along, and that was enough for me, just that he had shown up. Because I didn't think that he was supposed to be there. I didn't know how things worked back then. But that was a big thing for me. And so once they all went out canvassing, I just applied on my phone, and I said, I still don't know what I'm getting myself into, but I'm just going to step out in faith. And there's a verse, Hebrews 11 and verse 8, that really helped me back then when I didn't really realize what God was calling me to. Hebrews 11 and verse 8, speaking about Abraham. It says, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. And so I just had to lean upon that verse and say, hey, Abraham was called away from something he thought he was going to be in the rest of his life to a place he didn't even know. And so I just had to step out in faith. And I'm so glad that I made that decision, as I'm sure Abraham was glad that he made that decision, because at Souls West I really got the answer to how do I become better at reaching these people, and got the experience at so many doors, so many canvassing programs, so many classes about the Bible, and focused upon these things that I just praise God that he called me to this place. That's what I needed. It may not be what everyone needs, but it's what I needed at that time and what I was looking for. God is just so merciful.
How were the people in your life affected? Like your parents, your friends, your girlfriend? Like, did your change affect them positively or negatively?
It was very tough at first for my family, as things changed very rapidly. In the course of a couple of months, I had changed diet, I had changed what I did with my life, all of these things. And so it was all very different to them, because they're not even Christian. They don't go to church at all. They're not reading the Bible or any of these things. So it's very foreign to them. And they couldn't understand it at all. My mother and father went through a split right before my baptism. And so they were dealing with huge things at this time. And so, that was a time where I learned to pray, where I learned to really depend upon God. And so it was difficult at first. And as I began to study the Bible more and more, and unfortunately the girlfriend actually started to drift away from the church, and we split. at that time as well. And it's funny to go back to the church and she's not there, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're still here," you know. They expected I was just coming for the girl, but God had really stolen my heart, and so I was not going to leave. And they really saw the power of God there in that. And so it was difficult at first. Well, a lot of split at first, but now I have a very good relationship with my family still.
Thank God.
They enjoy the health message aspect of things. They still think I'm too skinny, but they have enjoyed some things I've been able to share with them that has helped them.
What about, and just curious, what about your friends? Like, have any of them like making decisions based on yours, or how did that look like?
They have not. You know, when I began to play poker and get involved with my girlfriend, I drifted away from a lot of my old friends at that time, and so I was not able to really connect with them so much more. Then afterwards, going off to school and stuff like that, we sort of fell apart. But praise God, one of my old friends really contacted me. He was going through something very struggling. He was struggling with something in his life, and he started to ask me about the Bible. He had heard that I'm now a Bible teacher and things like that. So I have a dialogue with one of them now
That's
who
awesome.
I'm able to pray for and encourage with Scripture.
As a Bible teacher now, what would you say about Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers? What would you say now knowing what you know, having read the whole Bible and studied?
Yes, I would say that if those books don't make much sense to people, that to go and read the Gospels first. Go and see how Jesus actually fulfilled these things. Learn about Jesus from the simple Gospels there, from his parables and all of the things that he's the master teacher at first. Learn his lessons first, and when you go back, you will see Jesus in the book of Leviticus. You will see Jesus in the midst of the sanctuary and those things. But start simple first, the Gospels first, and then go to those books, and they will come alive.
That's cool.
Thank you so much for sharing. I see now how your story also came full circle as someone who really seems so devoted and single-minded in purpose to maybe a worldly calling. And now your singleness of purpose and loving the things of God is beautiful. We also have contact information for Souls West. I believe if anyone wants to, if anyone feels called, as you were, they can also go to soulswest.org. And we have that for those of you viewers who are considering a career or considering a tract where you can also be a witness. Well, Tony, thank you so much. We love having Souls West graduates as well as teachers on our show. And we're so grateful that you've come and shared your testimony with us. And we will be praying for you as well, as you have souls that you are witnessing to at Souls West. And we thank you all so much for joining us. Our prayer for you is that you also will let your light shine before men, that you may glorify your Father which is in heaven, and that you may have your own story to share. We hope that you will join us next time, and if you feel so inclined, please give to LLBN.tv.